Hey everybody, thanks so much for coming, spending a few minutes with us talking about analytics. I have been a product manager for about 20 years, mainly in really big software companies. So I've worked at IBM, Microsoft, SAP, and now have my own consulting practice, and recently kicked off a startup aimed at helping product managers do career development called career.pm. I will talk a tiny bit more about that toward the end of the presentation. But we want to help all product managers develop, including those who are doing mobile development. So we see this as a development opportunity for folks to get their feet wet, understand a little bit about mobile analytics, or reinforce some of the things they already know. And that's how I ended up talking to Jonas.
Nice. Yeah. Hey, my name is Jonas Kurzwig. I'm head of marketing at UXCam. We are one of the market leaders in the mobile analytics industry. So we are tracking billions of data points every month. And yeah, I myself, as a marketeer, I'm in touch with metrics and analytics almost every day. So I know a thing or two about the topic. And today I want to share basically what I learned from our most successful customers with you, and give you like some fundamentals about App Metrics. It's App Metrics 101. Yeah, excited to get started and looking forward to helping you.
So let's review quickly what we will learn today. We called it 101. So we are going to cover the fundamental of data and analytics in a mobile context, but I think a lot of what we talk about applies to other domains as well. We'll talk about when you should use them and how to select the metrics you should use, aligning them with broader organizational metrics. And we will do a deep dive where we will do our best to answer your question. If we can't, we will try to get back to you with an answer. So that's what we are hoping you will learn today. And
awesome. Yeah, by the way, regarding the questions, some of you already asked some questions beforehand, and I prepared some slides for that. So you can be assured that we will also get to that. But first of all, I want to talk about data. When I was new to the space, when I heard the word data, what I thought about was like numbers, graphs, charts. And also like when Greg first announced this webinar, I felt like people were talking about numbers only. But in fact, they are like qualitative and quantitative data. And I think it's important to make the difference. So qualitative data and qualitative analytics covers the why, concerns itself with subjective data. So it concerns itself with understanding user behavior. And quantitative data is the like classic data, I guess. And it's looking at the hard numbers. It's wants to detect the hard facts. And the difference here is basically, the way you interpret it, because the quantitative is very objective and qualitative is subjective. So the interpretation is a bit different. But I think both are important. It's important to make the differentiation. So here I have a short graph I want to share with you to kind of explain it. So for example, here we have the qualitative analytics methods. So these are things like focus groups, interviews, or session recordings. So here's also like a differentiation between behavioral and attitudinal. And then we also have the quantitative data. This could be like surveys where you ask for like numbers, usage statistics, funnels, and stuff like that. And there are also like some methods that are kind of in between. For example, heat maps. Heat maps are based on the aggregation of numbers. So this would be quantitative, but the way it's displayed, the way you interpret it, it's like kind of like an image. So that's very qualitative. So sometimes the different methods mix up. And so you might ask yourself, okay, there are those two kind of data, which method should I choose? What should I go for? And I think the answer is very clear. It's you should do both. ideally, like what the most successful apps are doing is they're combining behavior-based qualitative analytics and number-based quantitative analytics to kind of get a 360-degree view of everything that's going on. And for example, I know that successful companies like Airbnb are very concerned with the hard numbers, but they also care about, you know, understanding user behavior. There's this cool story where at Airbnb, they actually hired Disney painters to kind of illustrate the whole customer journey in images. And I think this really shows you that this organization is very focused on understanding users and user behavior, while at the same time looking at the hard facts. Here's a product lifecycle, and I think all of you know it. So it starts, okay, the product gets introduced to the market, then it grows, then it matures, and then in the classical model, it declines. But nowadays, in the economy where products are continuously being developed, there's actually like the option for the product extension. And depending on which stage in the life cycle your product is in, you will have to choose different analytics methods. So an example I want to give you, where I spoke with one of our customers, he made a mistake that he just started out developing his app, and he wanted to be like super data driven, and he set up like all the sophisticated quantitative analytics. But the problem was he had little to no users, and therefore any quantitative analytics would be relatively unreliable because the number wouldn't be big enough to make a good statement. Therefore, in this stage of app development, you should really look to focus on the qualitative aspect of things, talk to users, do some user testing, show your app to like person walking across the street. And only if you enter like the growth stage and your user number grows, then it's time to take the quantitative analysis into the equation and kind of build your analytics stack in a more sophisticated way. Interesting stage is actually like the maturity stage. Here, you know, it's really important that you stay innovative. And one of our customers actually like has a really like sophisticated loop, analytics loop that he established here. So they're using amplitudes for quantitative analytics and UXCam for qualitative analytics. And they're using UXCam to come up with new hypotheses. Then they're using, then they implement this and they look at, okay, how does the number change in amplitudes, what's happening? And then they're continuing to monitor those changes. And if it works out, they keep it. If it doesn't work out, they throw it away. And then they just repeat the process, and instance by instance, they make the product better. And if you succeed to innovate, your product will extend. If you fail, usually your product will start to decline. All right, now I want to give it over to Greg for some case study.
Let's think about this in the context of a real world scenario. So we've got a surveillance solution called Eagleeyes, and here is our intrepid PM, Arna. He's been with the company for a while. He's been focused on creating web apps and thick clients. This is, you know, security related surveillance. And they sell their solution to cities. That's one of their key segments. And what they would like to do is open up the solution so that they can get data from not just kind of traditional fixed cameras, but also from people with their cell phones. So the way their solution works is they hang cameras all over the place. And instead of people watching those video feeds, there's software that is smart enough to detect when something happens, like when a fire starts or when a crowd starts to form in a place that it shouldn't, or they hear a gunshot. That information is sent to a command and control center that coordinates the response to that event. So here's very typical kind of, you know, canonical scenario. Operator comes in, they log onto the system at the command and control center. All of a sudden they get an alert that said a crowd is forming. That was detected automatically, once again, by software looking at video feeds. There's an intelligence layer that can correlate things, that tells them, hey, there was a concert in the park 2 hours before. This could be people who were at the concert who, you know, maybe have been drinking or something and are getting together. So, you know, he gets the event. He's displayed the procedure that he's supposed to follow, including capturing the relevant video data, calling the right public safety organizations, and he monitors the response and helps the responders coordinate until the issue is resolved. So that's what they do today, and now they would like citizens to be able to not only launch events, but to share relevant information. And here's a very simple architecture. You know, we've got the command and control center with people sitting at these workstations, not watching video, but they're waiting for the software to tell them that things are happening. Out in the operational environment, we've got traditional cameras, we've got some wireless cameras, and the new development is this citizen app. So people can download this app. They can very easily, you know, take video or send messages to the command and control center. And this can be a very valuable source of information, especially during the early stages of one of these events. So there you can see the app, very simple kind of UI. You record, and then you have the opportunity to add a message and submit what you found. So we will elaborate on this scenario as we go through the masterclass.
Cool. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I just want to quickly skim through those slides here. There are different types of mobile app metrics that you may or may not track. So I would say, like, there are general KPIs like daily active users, like stuff that just logical engagement, financial marketing should be self-explanatory. UX could be something like session depth, session length, how long do people stay in the app? Are there any crashes? You know, obviously a crash is a bad UX event. Or like App Store KPIs, this could refer to something like App Store ratings. They can also pick up some really like valuable information. So to be honest with you, like, to go through all those different detailed metrics and KPIs would take quite a lot of time. So probably like 3 webinars are needed for that. So after this class, we will send you a sheet where you can see all these different kind of KPIs, but for now I will skip it, but you can be ensured you will get it after the class. Yeah, back to Eagleeyes. Greg, are you there? Greg, I can't hear you.
Yeah, so how are we going to measure success in Eagleeyes? Some of these are very traditional app metrics like conversion. And within this app, the key concept of conversion is once somebody downloads it, they have to put in some profile information so we can identify them. So, you know, we want to see how many people not just download it, but actually set themselves up so that they can submit. Churn would be, yeah, people uninstalling the app. We want to know how many unique users there are per month. And then we really want to gather, you know, as rich a data set as we can. And the best way to do that is with video. So we have some metrics around the minutes of video that we capture per week, the video minutes that we capture per incident. And you can see, you know, other KPIs that we are using that will help us determine if we're, yeah, if the app is successful, is getting the kind of engagement that we want.
Cool. Looking forward to seeing the progress of this case study. So one thing that you might struggle with, that it's a question I hear a lot, is that, you know, tracking app metrics can feel like really overwhelming. You just saw all the different KPIs I showed you. And so this obviously leaves the question, how do you prioritize metrics? How do you know which metrics you should track right now? And I struggled with this for a long time also myself, until we got a new employee at our company, and she introduced us to a really cool framework that you can implement today at your company as well. And this is the OKR framework. So some of you might already know it. OKR stands for Objectives and Key Results, and it's a methodology that was pioneered by Google, and it really changed the way we do business at UXCam. So what are objectives? Objectives are your big ambitious goals for the quarter, and key results are the metrics that measure the achievement of an objective. So basically you think, okay, what do I want from my app? Maybe you want the app to go viral. Then you have to think about metrics that measure virality. And so you can kind of track those. Bottom line, you prioritize your metrics according to the big objectives you set yourself. And everything that's not part of the objective, you don't look at all. Or, okay, maybe not at all, but it's like second priority for you. And this really helps to stay focused in tracking metrics. Yeah, back to Eagleeyes.
Yeah, so what are our OKRs for the app specifically? You know, we talked about the metrics we were going to measure before. We have an objective around converting people who download into registered users. What are the results we're expecting? We want at least 400 downloads per week. And from those folks, we want 60% of them to register. And, you know, I like to make the key results time bound. So we want this by September. And at that point, depending on what we see, we may rethink the key results that we are looking for. We want to obviously encourage all kinds of engagement. So we want at least 40% of the registered users active per week. That means they interact with the app, they look at some data. And you know, we want like 7.5% of them to actually submit an incident per month. That's a pretty low percentage because, you know, in most cities, there's only so many things that happen. But you know, it's not just big, you know, maybe terrorist kind of attacks or something that are going to be submitted. Citizens can do things like if they see a car parked illegally, or if there is a water main broken or whatever, they can submit all kinds of stuff. And then once again, we really want to encourage them to use video when they submit an incident. That gives us the richest data source that we can go back and learn from. So we would like more than 5% of registered active users to submit video, and that's in the first 2 months. We'll see what happens, and we might adjust what we expect there. And we have some expectations around the length of the video. So if people are only filming like 5 seconds, we may not get the data that we need. We don't want them to film too much. But you know, as we pilot this citizen app, these are our key you know, OKRs.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, again, OKR framework, okay, this is a topic where we can have a whole class about. There are like lots of different stuffs that you have to think of if you implement this framework. So some resources I can recommend if you want to educate yourself further is you can go to okrexamples.co. You can watch a short YouTube video about it. It's only 6 minutes. You can also always talk to me. Just send me an email and ask me how we do it at UXCam if you have some questions. Happy to answer you. And also soon there will be a learning path for OKRs at Queer.pm, and I think that will be awesome as well. Cool. So how do you set up analytics SDKs for your app? Very basic question. So long story short, you don't do it. You ask your engineers to do it. But for any analytics SDK that's out on the market, not just us, it could be Firebase, Amplitude, Mixpanel. The basic integration usually is quite simple. So you just select the tool you want to have, then you tell your engineers, please add the code to my app, and then you can start to analyze. And to show you how simple it is, here's an example of our Android SDK, and it's only installed with 2 lines of code. But keep in mind that obviously if you want to customize your analytics tools, you will have to take more engineering work in account. For example, if you want to map events and stuff like this. So this is just for the basic integration. But yeah, it's best to coordinate with the engineering team about this topic and don't take care of it or don't even think about it for yourself. Oh, we've got a problem in our case study. Greg, maybe you want to highlight the problem.
Yeah, so here we are looking at some quantitative metrics. As a PM, I would be reviewing these periodically. I might get an alert if there's something that's really outside what I expect. And what we can see here is that video submissions all of a sudden fell to basically 0. And I know that this is on iOS. And I can look at the dates, that's a week back. I can see that we did launch a new version. It had, high adoption, a lot of people updated. And now I'm suspicious. So this is a perfect case where quantitative analytics give me some insight, alert me that there's a problem. But the question is, now what do I do? Right? I see that things are not going in the direction that I want to go. This is something that's very dramatic. I can isolate it to one of, it's on iOS. This isn't happening on Android. But what do I do? As a team, how do we go out and try to debug this thing, crawl inside it and really figure out what's going on? And that is where we need to turn to something that's more kind of qualitative, behavioral in nature to get insight into what the users are actually experiencing.
All right. So one of the things we can do to leverage qualitative analytics in this case is we can look at heat maps. So here's an example from Eagleeyes, but there are also other tools out there. You don't have to use us, just as an example. So one of the features here is that you can show different kind of heat maps. You can, for example, show heat maps for the first tab when people enter the screen. Can be nice to see, okay, intuitively, where do people tap first? But that's not the point here. Okay, here's the option to only show rage tabs. So rage tab is when people click on the screen real fast because they are frustrated because nothing happens. And here we can see there are some rage tabs here on the submit button. And the reason is people have to type in the message before they can submit, and they can't submit without typing the message. And so, for example, like this is something that you would never know if you just look at the numbers and where the qualitative analytics can come in. Another example could be session replays. Here you can see the whole video, see the whole timeline. Maybe this is a case that only happens on certain devices, and then you can watch the video to get more context of, okay, what's the problem? And then you can talk to your team and fix this. Cool. And what's the result, Greg? Maybe you can explain.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have a happy ending. And the idea is that as a product manager, I found out about the problem. I was able to get, kind of deep understanding about what was going on, get with my development team or get with my UX folks. This could simply be a UX issue. Maybe we want people to always add a message, but we didn't make that clear in the UX. Maybe that is, the UI. Maybe that isn't something that we want. So I can huddle the team. We can talk about what we want to do, and we can get it fixed much, more rapidly than if we were just trying to rely on, quantitative metrics. And I would add that, this kind of behavioral insight can actually help you get out in front of problems. You can look at this behavior. You can start seeing where people are getting stuck in, kind of a detailed way. And it helps you build this kind of empathy, this understanding. And as you see these things developing, you have an opportunity to potentially fix them before they really become, problems or blockers.
Awesome. One thing I noticed while working in the analytics market is that the analytics market is super crowded. So one resource we created once was an analytics list where we were like, let's just take every single analytics tool and list it up in one sheet. And there were like 90 plus solutions, and these were only like the best ones, the most known ones. And we could have gone forever with this. So obviously this gives us the question, how do we choose the right analytics tool? And I think it's a very important question. And we have identified 4 key factors that matter. So the first thing would be gather. So what kind of data does the tool gather? Is it quantitative, qualitative? We already talked about this. Maybe there's, for example, if you already use amplitude, probably it doesn't make sense to look at mixed panel because you already got those kind of data covered. Second thing would be mine and analyze. So how does the tool create results? For example, I think in amplitude, they recently made like great progress in the prediction. So with amplitude, now you're able to predict a lot of stuff. And this is more worth than just aggregating the data. Or maybe does the tool find certain patterns? And by the way, this, you can like make a sheet out of this and kind of compare like tools that you want to choose from. The third thing is visualization. So obviously as human beings, we think in a visual way. For us, it's easier to understand information if it's visually clear. So it's important that the tool you choose has clear reports, and also that the filtering is advanced so that it's easy to analyze. And lastly, and I think this is one of the most important steps, is does the tool enable you to act quickly? So for example, can you share some data quickly with your colleagues so that you can act upon it? Or is it like, okay, it's in a shell? And one tip I have for you is to create a taxonomy document. So you have an example of a company called Feature. So taxonomy document is basically like a guide where you can map events, and you can see, okay, for example here, are they already included in analytics, or is there something else that we need to track in the CRM somehow? So I would strongly suggest that you create a document like this. I will also send a link to this document later. All right, now we already have this all covered here. Greg, do you want to do the summary?
Would love to. So, what are the key points today? I think really fundamentally what we're saying is, I think in any domain, not just mobile, that we need to look at quantitative and qualitative analytics to get deeper insight, to build better empathy, and that has some very practical implications around debugging issues, being proactive. If we want to measure success for our app, we need to understand the broader definition of success. As we saw, this app is part of a bigger solution. I need to understand what that solution is trying to achieve. I need to understand what the city is trying to achieve. For example, they were really wanting to collect rich data around video. We are a company that does video analytics, in the case study. By the way, the case study is derived from real experience. Elements of it are kind of sanitized and manufactured, but this is stuff that's really going on. A great way to define success for your app, for your organization, for yourself, is to use the OKR framework. It's fairly simple. You define objectives and then the key results that you expect to follow from those. And there are a bunch of options available to you in terms of analytics tools. So you should think about the degree to which you can get this qualitative insight. And I think in most of the people in the call, at least that responded to the poll, are in kind of mature organizations, and most of them have some rigor around how they select tools, but Jonas gave you some insight into how you can take that methodical approach.
All right, cool. Yeah, career.pm.
Oh yeah, very quickly. I mentioned this at the beginning. Go to career.pm. We help product managers accelerate their careers. There are a lot of folks these days that have downtime, and I think we can give you a great way to make the best use of it. Jonas, maybe you can page. It doesn't seem to be working on my end. We offer a combination of elements that you can build into your own customized program. Really kind of your schedule, your budget, your priorities. So you can blend coaching with online training. We've got a bunch of really helpful tools and templates. We've got a community that you can participate in. We get discounts from partners. And a lot of the work we do is around personal branding. So helping people get their brand out there. We do interview prep. So we are over time collecting basically anything we think that could help a product manager develop themselves professionally. And we have recently launched PM Font. We wanted, as part of career.pm, a list of great resources. We ended up coming up with this thing. It's kind of a separate site, but you can go there and search for anything product management. This is an old screenshot, but at that point we had over 1,800 blog posts in our index. We have a bunch of podcast episodes, and it's just, think of it as Google for product management. So take a look there. I know I'm not exactly objective, but it's really fun. And there's a lot of stuff in there that you can learn.
Good. And now it's time for the deep dive. So we gave you some fundamentals. Are there some specific questions that we can help you with? Very interesting to know, and happy to answer your questions.
So you notice there aren't like real questions so far in the Q&A facility. Everybody can use that. It's in the Zoom panel that you're looking at. But one of the questions that was asked in the chat is UXCam available for other types of applications like web apps?
So at the moment, it's not available for web apps. So for web apps, I would recommend Hotjar. It shares some features, so it's a bit different than UXCam, but I think it's also a great tool. So we at UXCam also use it, and I think the two make a great pair.
Great. There's a question here as well about what is the best tool for cross-platform analytics. So you just mentioned one for a different platform, but are there frameworks that can allow you to collect one set of data across platforms?
That's a good question. So we are working on an integration with Adobe Analytics right now. So Adobe Analytics allows you to use both web and mobile and track it across. And we will integrate with Adobe Analytics, so then you can also get some data from Adobe and transfer to UXCam. But as far as I know, it's for Qualitative, it's a bit iffy. It's not possible right now, but yeah, I mean, we are also looking at this. We're also looking at, yeah, let's see. Yeah, Pratik also says Adobe Analytics. It's a good tool for quantitative analytics.
There's a question here about the URL for PM Font, and it is just pmfont.com.
Yeah, Anna is right. Amplitude can also do cross-platform. Amplitude is also another tool that I can recommend.
Okay, there was a nice question. I need to scroll up. What is your thought about qualitative research replacing user interviews, because PMs can just look at a record or report and answer the why question?
I don't think that's a good approach. I think it's always important to talk to users, and if it's just even if you don't get any new insights from it, if you talk to a human being, you just develop more empathy. And I think that's a very important thing in product management, to get the empathy for the user and develop the product with the user in mind.
Cool. Jonas, is UXCam available for staging and test mode apps?
Yes, you can start a free trial, UXCam, no questions asked, and there's also a free plan at the moment.
Okay, wonderful. There's a question here about whether PM should invest time watching product interaction videos. I think it's kind of rhetorical. Because I just think, yeah, it's a question of how much time and how much you invest to get that data, but nothing can replace watching people actually do stuff. And a lot of us have done research where we sit next to somebody and watch them work, but it's just not the same as somebody just unattended, like using an app. And I think in most cases, whatever the type of app, you will get insights that you simply can't get from quantitative data or from talking to people. I would love to hear if somebody has a different experience, but that's my perspective.
Yeah,
It
also,
can always be valuable. You have to weigh that based on how much it would take you to get the data.
yeah. I also think it's very important to use if you're looking at tools like qualitative tools, I think it's very important to use the filter system to kind of narrow it down, because you're right, it can take a lot of time to watch through every single session, especially if you have a big app, it's impossible. So you really should look to leverage this filter system that we have here. Or at the user, this is my favorite feature actually. For example, you can look at users that only use the app once and then never again, and you can kind of find out what happens. Or you can do the opposite and look at the user journeys of very successful app users, power users. If you do qualitative analytics, you should really look to filter down those information. Otherwise, it's too much. So the question is valid.
Jonas?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know if you were done. It sounded like you might have just faded out. I think like the last syllable didn't come through on my end. There is a question, a really interesting question, that what happens if, analytics based on data, regardless of the type of data, give you kind of one conclusion or indication, but your research and intuition is telling you something completely different. The question is, how should a PM proceed in this situation?
Greg, what do you think from your experience?
Yeah, I would say that the bar has to be pretty high on my intuition. So, for me to contradict data. So it's your job as a product manager. A lot of times the data won't show you what you need to know. There's something hidden in there. I mean, that's what we do as product managers. Different people can look at a market and see different levels of opportunity. That's just an example. So the way I look at it is, if I just really fundamentally feel like something's not being represented, then I would ask questions about the data. Otherwise, I try to accept it. And in my personal experience, that has served me well. The data is usually right. But I think we've all had those circumstances where we look at it and we're like, something is just not right. So in that case, I think it's important to be vocal about that, talk to the team. And sometimes you determine that you're not measuring the right thing. You're just not getting insight into you were trying to get one insight, and the data you're collecting isn't the right data, or the metric you've chosen isn't the right metric. So I think you should feel free to kind of raise your hand and say, I question this data, but the bar should be pretty high. We have all these things like confirmation bias and all these other things that can lead us to de-emphasize data when we should be listening to it. There was a question here about hybrid apps, and I think we talked about that a little bit. And the question is this, do you use the same approach for native apps? I don't know. I think, the integration is with native apps. So maybe you want to address that, Jonas?
Yeah, I mean, usually with hybrid apps, it can be difficult to, you have the native app, you have like two separate apps, and everything is clearly distinct. But with hybrid apps, obviously, like there can be some issues. I think it's just important to monitor it. But it's actually like a good question. I think I will need to check up with our tech team here to kind of get more depth on answering that question. By the way, if we miss any question that we can't get back to, I will go through the chat after this again. And if we missed any question, I will answer them afterwards and kind of follow up with you guys.
Okay. And I think we have time for one more question. And I will capture this question so we can follow up, the one that Jonas just addressed. I want to mention Keyshawn made a good point. He was talking about how, when there's a difference in our research and our experience, that maybe A/B testing is kind of a technique we could use to help get to the bottom of that. And what will be our final question today is, what do we think about migrating data between analytics tools? In their organization, they wanted to do that, but apparently they didn't get good results. So what is your experience with that, Jonas?
Yeah, I mean, this can be very difficult, and I don't think this is a problem that can be easily solved. I think it's also like migrating data is one issue. Also, other thing is like migrating users, like getting people adjusted to the new tool. Maybe there's some feature missing. But to be honest with you, I don't have a very clear answer to that. Like, okay, if one kind of analytics tool just doesn't fit well to the other and the data isn't migrated correctly, there's most of the time there's not much you can do about it. But I also want to make clear, like, okay, if you make a change and it doesn't work out, then just go back to your old tool might be the best approach. Okay, we have some more questions here. Greg, I don't know if you have time for that, but I will follow up with all of those. So if you still have any questions, I will send them over to you. And I also got a few questions beforehand about app retention. So I have some slides prepared for that. So I don't think we have time for that right now. But after this class, I will send you all the slides. It will have some more information about like retention rate, how to increase retention rate. Here I would recommend a book by Nia Eyal. Okay, it's a nice formula here. Then also I talk a bit about customer lifetime value, different ways to calculate it. And last but not least, I talk about cohort analysis. So these are some slides that I will send to you afterwards. Cool.
Yeah, I would ask everybody to please give us feedback in the poll. Really helps us understand how well we did and hopefully improve future webinars. And on that note, we would, we are thinking about doing follow-on webinars where maybe we go deeper into mobile analytics topics. So I know how valuable everyone's time is. We really appreciate your taking the time to be here and interact and especially give us feedback. So you will be hearing from us with a list of resources and materials. We hope to see you in the career.pm community. Give PM font look, play around with that a little bit. As I told you, it's a lot of fun. And if you have a need to get this kind of deeper behavioral insight into your mobile apps, we hope you will, consider UXCam. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you very much. And like I said, sorry for every question that I couldn't answer today or that Greg couldn't answer today. We will follow up with each and every one of you. And yeah, I also really appreciate your time. It means a lot to me. Thanks, everyone.